She found a homeless man hiding in her garage. What happened next will melt your heart. Before we go further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this one. The snow fell like whispers from the sky, soft and persistent, clinging to every branch and blanketing the road ahead. Emilia gripped the steering wheel a little tighter as her car pushed forward through the winding forest road that cut into Maple Hollow, a name that sounded too sweet for how hollow she felt inside. She hadn't spoken a word in hours, the silence broken only by the rhythmic sweep of the wipers and the muffled hum of the heater. Her breath fogged the edge of the glass, the temperature inside the car warm, but never quite enough to melt the cold sitting in her chest. Maple Hollow was a small town, not even a dot on most maps. That was the point. Emilia wasn't looking for excitement, or even comfort. She wanted distance. From the city, from the memories, from everything that used to define her. The headlights flickered off the white road signs as she turned down a gravel path lined with bare trees. At the end of it stood a modest, two-story house, faded blue shutters, a detached garage sitting off to the side. It looked untouched by time and untouched by anyone else. She parked in front, engine humming in the quiet. Snowflakes danced in the beams of her headlights. Emilia sat still for a moment, her gloved hands resting in her lap. Her heart pounded, not from fear exactly, something more complicated, a question she couldn't yet answer. Stepping out, her boots crunched into the fresh snow. The cold hit her face like a splash of water, but it was grounding. She popped the trunk, pulled out a single suitcase and a backpack, and trudged toward the porch. The house creaked as she opened the front door. It smelled like old wood and distant memories, the kind that didn't belong to her, but felt heavy anyway. She walked through the entryway slowly, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The furniture had been left behind by the last owner. A couch covered in plastic, a coffee table with a slight warp, and dusty curtains that swayed with the draft. It wasn't much, but it was hers now. She set her suitcase down and looked around. No voices, no traffic, no neighbors shouting over fences. Just silence. Heavy, unfamiliar, and complete. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Emilia moved to the window and watched as it covered the ground in a clean, white layer. She couldn't help but wonder if life could be erased so easily, hidden under the quiet cover of snow. Could it also be rewritten? The heating kicked on with a dull groan. She peeled off her coat and ran her fingers along the edge of the kitchen counter. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space behind her. Everything felt foreign, but not in a bad way. More like a blank page waiting to be written on. She passed a hallway mirror and caught her reflection. Pale face, tired eyes, blonde hair pulled into a loose braid. A version of herself that was still figuring things out. Still healing. Back in the living room, she pulled a throw blanket over her shoulders and sat on the couch. From her position, she could see the garage through the front window, dark, still, and somehow unsettling. She didn't know then that it wasn't empty, that beneath the silence, something or someone was already waiting. But for now, there was only snowfall and the promise of a new beginning. The wind howled against the windows like a distant cry. Emilia stirred on the couch, blanket tangled around her legs, the television casting dim light across the room. It had been hours since she arrived in Maple Hollow, but sleep remained out of reach. Too much change, too much silence. Then came the sound, faint metallic. A clink, another, not the groan of pipes or the settling of old wood. Something outside. She sat up, heartbeat quickening. Through the frosted window, the detached garage stood in darkness, its outline barely visible through the falling snow. She moved quietly, pulling on her coat, boots already by the door. The house was still, but her instincts were sharp now, buzzing with tension. In the entryway closet, she found what she needed, a wooden baseball bat, dusty and long and used. She stepped outside. The cold bit at her cheeks as she crossed the yard. Snow crunched beneath each step, the kind of sound that amplified the quiet around it. The garage loomed ahead, and as she neared, she noticed the side door slightly ajar, swaying with the wind. Her fingers wrapped tighter around the bat. One breath, then two. She pushed the door open with the tip of the bat and stepped inside. The overhead light flickered weakly, casting harsh shadows on boxes and tools. And then, movement. A man. He stood near the workbench, eyes wide, face pale from the cold. Dark hair, rugged jaw, clothes layered but soaked at the seams. For a second, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, he raised both hands. "Please," he said, voice hoarse. "I didn't take anything." Emilia didn't lower the bat. Her chest rose and fell in short bursts. "Who are you?" "No one," he murmured, "just trying to stay warm." His eyes weren't wild. No aggression, no threat. Just exhaustion. The kind that came from running too long, too far. The kind she recognized. "I'll go," he added, already shifting toward the door. "Stop." Her voice surprised even her. He paused, arms still lifted. "How long have you been in there?" "A few hours. I thought it was empty. I wasn't trying to scare anyone." The light above them buzzed and dimmed again. Emilia studied him carefully. A stranger in her garage, in the middle of nowhere. She should have called the police, or at least told him to leave. But something in his voice, in his eyes, disarmed her. Maybe it was the snow clinging to his sleeves, the way his hands trembled. Or maybe it was the way he didn't look at her with pity or menace. Just quiet desperation. "One night," she said at last. His brows furrowed. "What?" "One night," she repeated. "You can stay. Just for the night." He blinked. "Why?" "I don't know," she replied, lowering the bat. "But I don't think you're here to hurt me. And I don't think you'll survive another night out there." The man hesitated, still unsure whether this was a trick. Emilia motioned toward the house with her chin. "The couch. No funny business." He nodded slowly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." She turned and walked toward the house, not looking back to see if he followed. But she heard his footsteps in the snow behind her, cautious, reluctant, like someone not used to being offered kindness. Inside, she pointed him toward the couch, handed him a folded blanket, and said nothing more. She didn't sleep that night, and as snow continued to fall outside, she had no idea her world had already begun to shift. The next morning, Julian was already outside when Emilia woke. She watched from the window, mug in hand, as he shoveled the front path. The snow was still falling, but lighter now, almost graceful. His coat looked thin for this weather, sleeves rolled up slightly, as if he didn't notice the cold. He worked quietly, methodically, not like someone trying to repay a favor, but like someone simply trying to be useful. She hadn't asked him to do it. By midday, he'd repaired the cracked window in the kitchen that had let in a draft the night before. Emilia came in to find the glass replaced, frame resealed, and a faint scent of fresh caulk hanging in the air. He didn't mention it, just nodded once when she glanced his way. That evening, the smell of something savory crept through the house. Julian was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled back again, brow furrowed as he stirred a pot on the stove. Emilia leaned against the doorway. "You didn't have to cook. You didn't have to let me stay." She said nothing to that. The silence lingered, not tense, just full, measured. They ate at opposite ends of the table, candles flickering between them. The food was good, surprisingly good. She wondered how many meals he'd cooked for himself in places colder and less welcoming than this. He never asked questions, never pushed, never made small talk just to fill the air. And that, more than anything, began to disarm her. Over the next few days, the rhythm of the house changed. Julian would rise early, tend to the yard, chop wood, run errands into town when needed. Emilia kept to herself, always watching from a distance. She wasn't sure why she didn't ask him to leave once the snow let up. Maybe it was his quiet presence, or maybe it was the silence that had become comfortable. One night, the wind howled again. Snow tapped against the windows like soft knocks. Emilia brewed tea and brought 2 cups into the living room without saying a word. Julian looked up from the old book he'd found on her shelf, surprised. He accepted the cup, nodded his thanks. They sat across from each other, the fire crackling low. "My brother was a painter," she said, her voice breaking the stillness. Julian didn't respond, didn't even shift in his seat. He just listened. He was vibrant, loud, sometimes too loud. But when he painted, everything quieted down. He used to say grief, made the best colors. Julian looked at her, gaze steady. He passed last winter, she continued. I couldn't be in the city anymore. Too many memories. Too many empty rooms. She wrapped her hands tighter around the mug. Julian didn't offer condolences. He didn't say I'm sorry like so many had. Voices dipped in pity. Instead, he said softly, you still see him. In the little things. Emilia nodded, her eyes damp. Everywhere. For a while, neither of them spoke. The fire filled the silence, the warmth settling over them like a blanket. There was something unspoken between them. Not romance, not yet. Just an understanding. Two people with fractures. Two lives paused, now slowly unfreezing. When Emilia stood to leave, Julian whispered, your brother would have been proud. She didn't answer, but the way her shoulders eased as she walked away said everything. That night, the silence between them didn't feel so heavy. It felt shared. Morning light spilled through the kitchen windows, soft and golden, cutting through the winter chill that lingered in the air. Emilia moved quietly, collecting empty mugs from the table, when something caught her eye. A sketchbook. She hadn't seen it there before. It's that slightly open, edges worn, graphite, smudged along the cover like fingerprints. Hesitating only a moment, she picked it up and flipped to the first page. Her breath caught. It was her. Not a rough sketch or lazy doodle. A portrait rendered with impossible precision and raw, vulnerable detail. Her eyes, half lowered, lips parted slightly, as if caught mid-thought. Each stroke of pencil carried emotion she hadn't even realized she'd worn on her face. She turned the page. Another. This time, her profile in firelight. Then again, standing near the window, pages upon pages. Moments of her life she never knew someone was watching, let alone memorizing. The art wasn't just technically perfect. It felt like her. Heart pounding, Emilia stopped at a signature in the bottom corner of one piece. Julian Whitaker. The name echoed. Familiar. She set the sketchbook down with trembling hands and reached for her phone. A quick search brought a cascade of headlines. Julian Whitaker, the phantom of the canvas. A prodigy vanished. There were articles, exhibitions, interviews from years ago. Critics called him the next great American artist. Then suddenly nothing. Disappeared without explanation. Now, he was sleeping on her couch. The floor creaked behind her. She turned, phone still in hand. Julian stood in the doorway, face unreadable, gaze drifting to the sketchbook. You left this out, she said quietly. I didn't mean to, he replied. Julian Whitaker, she said, almost like a question. He nodded once. That's me. Or was. Emilia folded her arms, uncertain whether to be angry, betrayed, or simply stunned. Why didn't you tell me? He stepped inside, keeping his voice low. Because I didn't think it mattered. Not here. Not to you. You've been hiding. I've been surviving. She looked down at the drawings again. They're me. I couldn't help it, he admitted. I started sketching the first morning I saw you in the snow. Something about you. He stopped himself. You looked like someone trying to stay whole in a world that kept cracking. The room fell silent. The heater kicked on. Snow tapped against the window panes. I didn't run from fame, Julian continued. I ran from what it turned me into. Every gallery wanted more. Every critic expected brilliance. I stopped painting what mattered. I stopped seeing the world. I lost everything, especially the reason I started. And now, you brought it back, he said, without even trying. Emilia held his gaze, her thoughts a blur. Why me? Because you don't pretend. You don't perform. You just are. She exhaled slowly. The weight of his honesty settled over her like a blanket, too warm to ignore, too delicate to push away. I didn't ask for this, she said finally. I know. I didn't want anyone watching me. I wasn't trying to steal anything, he replied, eyes soft. You gave me something I thought I'd lost. I just drew it. She glanced at the sketchbook again, fingers grazing the edge. You're not who I thought you were, she said. Julian lowered his head. I'm not sure I ever was. A beat passed between them. Not quite forgiveness. Not yet understanding. But a door cracked open. Emilia didn't close the sketchbook. She didn't ask him to leave. She just walked past him, leaving the truth open on the table behind her. graphite lines tracing the quiet bond they were no longer pretending didn't exist. The gallery was small, tucked between an old bookstore and a quiet cafe in a nearby town. On the outside, nothing remarkable. A single poster hung in the window. New works by Julian, one night only. Emilia hadn't planned to come. She only found the invitation tucked between pages of a sketchbook. No note, no explanation. Just a date, time, and place. Curiosity led her there. Curiosity, and something else she wasn't ready to name. The moment she stepped inside, the air shifted. Muted light spilled from overhead track lamps, guiding visitors down narrow aisles. The scent of varnish and faint citrus polish lingered. Footsteps echoed softly on hardwood floors as strangers moved from canvas to canvas, murmuring in awe. And there she was. Not once, not twice. Everywhere. Emilia stood frozen as her own face met her in every direction. Not identical, not staged, but felt. In one painting, she looked out a fogged window, melancholy etched into her features. In another, she was caught mid-laugh beside a snow-dusted tree. One canvas captured her reaching for a kettle in the early morning light. Another showed only her hands, dusted in flour, the curve of her shoulders suggesting more emotion than an entire spoken story. No two portraits were alike, but each carried the same quiet reverence. The brushstrokes captured not just how she looked, but who she was. A woman rebuilding, a soul mid-healing, strong and breakable, guarded yet open in moments she didn't know anyone saw. Visitors stood inches from her essence, admiring the work, never realizing the subject stood quietly among them. She's breathtaking, a woman whispered to her partner. The way he paints her like he knows everything she's afraid to say, the man replied. Emilia turned away, throat tight. Across the room, near the farthest wall, Julian stood in the shadows. Hands in his coat pockets, head slightly bowed, watching. Not seeking praise, not expecting gratitude. Just waiting. She didn't rush to him. Instead, she wandered deeper into the space, pausing at a large canvas near the center. This one was different, raw, abstract, bold swipes of charcoal and crimson. Her face wasn't visible, but she knew it was her. The grief was unmistakable, a storm swirling behind her ribs. The feeling of waking up in a new town with nowhere to go but forward. And beside it, one last painting. Smaller, quiet. She stood in the garage doorway, bat in hand, uncertain. Snow fell around her. The light flickered. That moment, the beginning. Tears welled in her eyes. Not from embarrassment, not even from surprise, but because someone had finally seen her fully, unflinchingly, and painted it without distortion. She turned toward Julian. He hadn't moved. Their eyes met across the crowd, and for a heartbeat, everything else disappeared. She walked toward him slowly, still unsure what she wanted to say. But he looked at her with no expectations, only hope, and something softer. "You did all this," she said quietly. "I had to," he replied. "You gave me my voice back. You gave me my reflection." They didn't touch, didn't cry. They just stood there, in a room filled with unsaid things, surrounded by the unspoken truths of her life, turned into art. No longer strangers, no longer hiding. The gallery door swung shut behind her with a soft click, muting the hum of conversation and footsteps. Emilia stepped onto the quiet street, her breath catching in the icy air. Snow had begun to fall again, light and slow, like a hush laid gently over the world. Street lamps flickered above, casting a pale amber glow across the sidewalk. Her boots pressed faint impressions into the fresh snow, each step measured. The air felt thick with something unfinished. She didn't hear him approach, but she felt it, a shift in the stillness. Julian stood behind her, hands in his coat pockets, eyes soft with hesitation. For once, he didn't carry the quiet confidence he wore so easily in his art. This version of him was exposed, raw, uncertain. She turned slowly to face him. Neither spoke for a moment. The space between them felt suspended in time, the rest of the town fading behind the snowfall. "I didn't think you'd come," he said at last, voice low. I almost didn't, she replied. But you did. Their eyes met. He took a careful step forward, as if not wanting to break the fragile trust they'd built. You didn't just save my life, Emilia, he said. You gave it meaning. Her breath caught. Julian's voice wavered, but he didn't look away. Before I met you, I was empty, wandering, painting ghosts of things I'd already lost. But then you walked into that garage with fire in your eyes and a bat in your hands, and I started breathing again. Emilia didn't move. Her throat tightened, the cold biting at her cheeks. I didn't expect to find you, he added, but I'm not the same without you. I don't want to be. Snow clung to his lashes. His shoulders rose and fell with every word, as if he had carried these confessions for years. She blinked, and tears traced slow paths down her face, freezing before they fell. Her voice broke softly through the quiet. You showed me I could feel again. Julian froze. I came here to forget, she continued, her eyes locked on his. To hide. And then you, with your silence, your sketches, your strange calm, you reminded me I was still alive. Another breath. The snow fell heavier now, cloaking the street in silence. I've never had someone see me that clearly, she said. I wasn't trying to, Julian whispered. You just made it impossible not to. And then she stepped forward. One small step closed the space between them. Her gloved hand brushed against his chest, just over his heart. He covered it gently with his own, fingers trembling beneath the cold. The kiss came not from urgency, but from stillness. A quiet surrender to something that had been building in every shared glance, every unspoken word. Their lips met beneath the golden light, slow and certain. Two fractured souls touching for the first time with nothing left to hide. Snow swirled around them, falling on shoulders and lashes, melting where skin met warmth. When they pulled apart, neither spoke. They didn't need to. In that breathless moment, beneath the glowing street lamp and the endless white sky, the world stopped just long enough for two people to begin again. Not as strangers, not as wanderers, but as something new, together. The snow hadn't let up by morning, but neither had the warmth that lingered between them. Back in Maple Hollow, the house looked the same, quiet, modest, half buried in white. But inside, something had shifted. The silence no longer felt hollow. It had depth now, presence. Julian stood at the kitchen counter, sleeves pushed back, sketchbook open beside a steaming mug. His pencil moved slowly, capturing the curve of a window pane frosted with ice. Across from him, Emilia leaned on the table, watching without a word. The rhythm of graphite against paper had become part of the soundtrack of her mornings, just like the kettle's whistle and the muffled crunch of snow beneath boots outside. She looked out the window. The garage stood in the distance, its roof blanketed in snow. A memory flickered, the fear, the bat, the man in the shadows. She smiled faintly. Amazing how something so uncertain had become a cornerstone of her peace. Julian glanced up, as if sensing her thoughts. Their eyes met briefly, and she gave a small nod. Later, wrapped in a thick blanket, they sat side by side on the porch. Emilia held a book in one hand, the other resting over Julian's knee. He had his sketch pad open again, though for once, the page was blank. He wasn't rushing to fill it. The world didn't need capturing in that moment. It was enough just to sit in it. Snow drifted lazily through the trees, soft and constant. I used to think stillness was a kind of failure, Emilia murmured. That if I wasn't moving, fixing, proving something, I was falling behind. Julian leaned back, breath clouding the air. Stillness is how you find your shape again. She looked at him, not with awe, but understanding. And what if you're not sure what that shape is anymore? He turned the sketch pad toward her and, with a single stroke, began drawing. Not her face this time, but her outline, free-form, shifting, a shape in motion, not fixed. A reminder that change wasn't loss. It was evolution. They sat there as the sky deepened to a quiet gray, the snow turning more silver than white. Neither rushed the moment. Neither wanted to. Eventually, Julian set the pad aside and pulled her closer, his arm wrapped securely around her shoulders. Emilia leaned in without hesitation, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of a heart no longer lost. The town beyond them was still. Windows glowed faintly in neighboring homes. Smoke curled from chimneys. It was a small life, quiet, uneventful to the outside world, but for them, it was exactly enough. Emilia closed her eyes. She thought of her brother, of grief, of silence, of long nights in a strange town, of art and snowfall, and the stranger who'd taught her how to be seen again. And in that stillness, she breathed without aching. A voiceover could have carried her words, soft and sure. We don't always choose when the storm comes. But sometimes, if we're lucky, we find someone willing to sit through it with us. And in the calm that follows, we find ourselves. The camera would pull back slowly, two figures wrapped in warmth, the porch light casting a soft halo through the flurries. A world asleep beneath snowfall, and two hearts quietly beginning their forever. The snow hadn't let up by morning, but neither had the warmth that lingered between them. Back in Maple Hollow, the house looked the same, quiet, modest, half buried in white. But inside, something had shifted. The silence no longer felt hollow. It had depth now, presence. Julian stood at the kitchen counter, sleeves pushed back, sketchbook open beside a steaming mug. His pencil moved slowly, capturing the curve of a window pane frosted with ice. Across from him, Emilia leaned on the table, watching without a word. The rhythm of graphite against paper had become part of the soundtrack of her mornings, just like the kettle's whistle and the muffled crunch of snow beneath boots outside. She looked out the window. The garage stood in the distance, its roof blanketed in snow. A memory flickered. The fear, the bat, the man in the shadows. She smiled faintly. Amazing. How something so uncertain had become a cornerstone of her peace. Julian glanced up, as if sensing her thoughts. Their eyes met briefly, and she gave a small nod. Later, wrapped in a thick blanket, they sat side by side on the porch. Emilia held a book in one hand, the other resting over Julian's knee. He had his sketch pad open again, though for once, the page was blank. He wasn't rushing to fill it. The world didn't need capturing in that moment. It was enough just to sit in it. Snow drifted lazily through the trees, soft and constant. I used to think stillness was a kind of failure, Emilia murmured. That if I wasn't moving, fixing, proving something, I was falling behind. Julian leaned back, breath clouding the air. Stillness is how you find your shape again. She looked at him, not with awe, but understanding. And what if you're not sure what that shape is anymore? He turned the sketch pad toward her, and, with a single stroke, began drawing. Not her face this time, but her outline, free-form, shifting. A shape in motion, not fixed. A reminder that change wasn't loss. It was evolution. They sat there as the sky deepened to a quiet gray, the snow turning more silver than white. Neither rushed the moment. Neither wanted to. Eventually, Julian set the pad aside and pulled her closer, his arm wrapped securely around her shoulders. Emilia leaned in without hesitation, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of a heart no longer lost. The town beyond them was still. Windows glowed faintly in neighboring homes. Smoke curled from chimneys. It was a small life, quiet, uneventful to the outside world, but for them, it was exactly enough. Emilia closed her eyes. She thought of her brother, of grief, of silence, of long nights in a strange town, of art and snowfall, and the stranger who'd taught her how to be seen again. And in that stillness, she breathed without aching. A voiceover could have carried her words, soft and sure. We don't always choose when the storm comes. But sometimes, if we're lucky, we find someone willing to sit through it with us. And in the calm that follows, we find ourselves. The camera would pull back slowly, two figures wrapped in warmth, the porch light casting a soft halo through the flurries. A world asleep beneath snowfall, and two hearts quietly beginning their forever. If you enjoyed this story, ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing, heartfelt stories like this. Also, let us know where you're watching from, and drop your thoughts in the comments. What did you think of Emilia's quiet strength or Julian's emotional journey from broken artist to rediscovered purpose? Did their winter connection in Maple Hollow move you as much as it did us? We'd love to hear your favorite moment, whether it was the garage encounter, the gallery reveal, or the snowfall confession. Your support keeps these beautiful stories alive. Thank you for watching.